We're going to talk about lifting. Make sure that you have sprayed your paints or wet your paints so that they have a chance to start to dissolve into the water the pigment does. We're going to take our pencil, and on our page that we've been working on our wash and our graduated wash, we're going to do another square. And this square or rectangle, whatever shape it ends up being, we're going to call lifting. We're going to learn about ways to do watercolor lifting. This is a great technique to learn in order to add things like clouds or highlights into your objects when you're using watercolor. And this is just another means by which watercolor works. So it's just a technique for using watercolor. So I have my paints. They are wet now. I have brought a cotton ball and a Q-tip, and I have a paper towel, and I'm going to use these objects for lifting. I'm going to show you also how you can use a regular eraser. So these are just common objects that you have around your house to use. You can also use things like bubble wrap and other objects, crinkled up paper, saran wrap. These are all going to make different textures. They're going to lift different ways out of your watercolor wash. And so it's going to give you different textures if you're looking for a texture for a rock or if you're looking for textures for clouds. These are different ways to get them. Today we're going to stick with just these three. And then I want you to spend some time exploring for yourself ways to lift the watercolor. The first thing we need to do is do a watercolor wash, just like what we learned. So if you remember, always start off with a wet brush, a clean wet brush. And I'm going to paint this area in, making sure that it's wet. I don't want puddles of water standing on my paper, but I do want to make sure that my entire area is wet. And I'm going to get my pigment, making sure that it's the consistency of ink from an ink pen. I'm going to charge my brush with my pigment, and I'm going to put it in there. You remember that the water will start spreading on its own, and in a wash, it's going to end up as an even tone, just like this wash here. Once it dries. We don't want hard edges. We want an even tone. Okay, so now while it's wet, I'm going to quickly wash my brush, reshape it, get the extra water out, and I'm going to use my cotton ball. I'm going to come back with my cotton ball and I'm going to dab it. You can see that the pigment is getting on my cotton ball, and you can see that it's starting to change down here. So the more I press and smush around, the more it's going to take away that pigment. The same thing will happen with a Q-tip. So my Q-tip is clean. I'm going to do a spiral line in my watercolor. You can see that. That is what lifting is. So I simply put it down on the wet pigment. You can flip it over. And I can take away the pigment while it's still wet. So you can add things like highlights or just lines in it. Once the pigment has dried, you can no longer use these materials to do it, but you can use an eraser to go back and erase watercolor. So I'm going to use my dry wash that we've done in another lesson, previous lesson, because it's already dry, and I'm going to use an eraser on the end of my pencil. And I'm just going to erase a line just like this. And you see that it's taking away or lifting away that pigment from my paper. So you can see that. So you could do it in a highlight if you needed a highlight. Say you're painting an orange. And you needed a highlight on that orange and it was already dry, you can go back and use the eraser to do that. Another thing that you can do when your pigment is dry is you can use a clean, wet brush, and you can apply water where you want to take that pigment away. So I'm just applying water, and just like I did with my eraser, I'm going back and forth, and I'm going to clean my brush, and it's got to be wet. And I'm causing that pigment, just like it gets wet in my palette, I'm causing it to get wet on my paper, and I'm going back and forth. I'm going to dry my brush. I'm going to go back and take away the water that I've been working with because I don't want it to keep spreading. I want to just focus on taking that stripe away. And then I'm going to clean it, get all that pigment out, and it's wet again. I need to dry it a little bit, and I can go back and take that away. Dry it, take it away. So if I need to lighten up in areas, a lot of people think that once you've laid down watercolor, you're finished. Once it's dry, you're doomed. If you made a mistake, you can never go back, and that's not true. While it's wet, you can do cool lifting things like this with different materials. Once it's dry, you can go back with an eraser, a pencil eraser or pink pearl eraser, or you can go back with a wet brush and you can take away some of that. Now, if you notice, the pencil eraser will go all the way back down to the white of the paper. Taking it away with a wet brush is not going to take it all the way back down to the white of the paper. It is going to lift some layers of that pigment, but it's going to allow that most bottom layer to continue to stain the paper. But if you are just trying to lighten up a layer, then this is a good way of doing it, a good way of taking off some of that paint.